Selections on the topic of negative emotions, as quoted from Peter Ouspensky in his book, The Fourth Way. Question: is the control of our emotions a reasonable objective? Ouspensky: control of emotions is a very difficult thing. It is a very important part of self-study, but we cannot begin with the control of emotions because we do not understand enough about emotions. What we can do from the very beginning of observing the emotional function is to try to stop one particular manifestation in ourselves. We must try to stop the manifestation of unpleasant emotions. For many people, this is one of the most difficult things because unpleasant emotions are expressed so quickly and so easily that you cannot catch them. Yet unless you try, you cannot really observe yourself. So from the very beginning, when observing emotions, you must try to stop the expression of unpleasant emotions. This is the first step. In this system, we call all these unpleasant, violent, or depressing emotions by the name of negative emotions. The first step is trying not to express these negative emotions. The second step is the study of negative emotions themselves, making lists of them, finding their connections, because some of them are simple and some are compound, and trying to understand that they are quite useless. It sounds strange, but it is very important to understand that all negative emotions are absolutely useless. They do not serve any useful purpose. They do not make us acquainted with new things or bring us nearer to new things. They do not give us energy. They only waste energy and create unpleasant illusions. They can even destroy physical health. The third step, after a certain amount of study and observation, is that we may come to the conclusion that we can get rid of negative emotions, that they are not obligatory. Here, the system helps because it shows that in fact there is no real center for negative emotions, but that they belong to an artificial center in us, which we create in childhood by imitating people with negative emotions by whom we are surrounded. People even teach children to express negative emotions. Then children learn still more by imitation. They imitate older children. Older children imitate grown-up people. And so at a very early age, they become professors of negative emotions. It is a great liberation when we begin to understand that there are no obligatory negative emotions. We are born without them, but we teach ourselves negative emotions. Question: to be free from negative emotions, must we be able to stop them from arising? Ouspensky: this is wrong, because we cannot control emotions. I mentioned the different speed of different functions, between the instinctive function, the moving function, the emotional function, and the intellectual function. The slowest is the intellectual function. Next come moving instinctive functions, which have an approximately equal speed that is enormously quicker than the intellectual function. The emotional function should be even quicker, but it generally works at about the same speed as the instinctive function. So moving, instinctive, and emotional functions are very much quicker than thought, and it is impossible to catch emotions with thought. When we are in an emotional state, thoughts succeed each other so quickly that we have no time to think. As we are now, real struggle with negative emotions is a question of the future. Not a very far future, but there are many things we need to know first, and methods which we must study. There is no direct way. We must learn roundabout methods of how to attack them. First of all, we have to change many of our mental attitudes, which are more or less in our power. By this I mean intellectual attitudes, or points of view. We have too many wrong points of view about negative emotions. We find them necessary, or beautiful, or noble. We glorify them. We must get rid of all that. We have to clean our mind in relation to negative emotions. When our mind is right concerning negative emotions, when we have ceased to glorify them, then little by little we shall find a way to struggle with them, each separately. One person finds it easier to struggle with one particular negative emotion. Another finds it easier with another kind of negative emotion. You must begin with the easiest, and what is easiest for me may be the most difficult for you. So you must find the easiest for yourself, and later come to the more difficult. Question. Does that explain why I associate certain of my own negative emotions with people I remember back in my childhood? Ouspensky. Quite probably, because many negative emotions are learned by imitation. But some may be essentially in our nature, because our nature also has different inclinations one way or another way. Emotions can be divided into groups, and one person may be more inclined to one group and another to another group. For instance, some people have an inclination to different forms of fear, others to different forms of anger, but they are different and do not come from imitation. Question. Are they the hardest to struggle with? Ouspensky. Yes, but they are generally based on some kind of weakness, because at the basis of negative emotions, there generally lies a kind of self-indulgence. One allows oneself. And if one does not allow oneself fears, one allows anger. And if one does not allow anger, one allows self-pity. Negative emotions are always based on some kind of permission. But before we come to such complicated questions as struggle with negative emotions, it is important to observe ourselves in small, everyday manifestations of the moving function, and also see those which we can observe of the instinctive function, that is, our sensations of pleasant and unpleasant, warm and cold, sensations which are always passing through us. Question. What negative emotions are we likely to glorify? Ouspensky. Some people are very proud of their irritability or irritation or something like that. They like to be thought very hard. There's practically no negative emotion which you cannot enjoy, and that is the most difficult thing to realize. Really, some people get all their pleasures from negative emotions. Question. Does one acquire this knowledge of oneself through self-observation? Ouspensky. Self-observation is connected with certain practices. If you just start observing how things happen, you will miss many things. But if you try to struggle against some of the things you see, for instance against small habits, you will at once begin to see many things which ordinarily you do not notice. Everyone has many small habits. Habits of walking, habits of moving their hands, habits of sitting, standing, speaking in a certain way. This struggle is not for any particular results, but merely for self-observation. Perhaps later you will find that you have to get rid of certain habits, but at present this struggle should be merely for self-study. At the same time, if we want to develop consciousness and improve our functions, almost from the very beginning of self-observation, we are advised to try and stop some of our functions which are not only useless, but definitely harmful. For instance, in observing yourself, particularly in observing the emotional function, try to stop as much as possible all expression of negative emotions. Many people's lives practically consist of that. They express negative emotions at every possible moment, on any occasion. Whether suitable or unsuitable, they can always find something wrong in everything. The chief tendency of man 1, 2, and 3 is to express immediately all his negative emotions. If he makes an effort to stop this expression, it gives him material for observation, and he sees himself from quite a different angle. If he makes serious efforts in this direction, very soon he will become convinced that he has no will, because it is a most difficult thing to stop this expression of negative emotions. At the same time, it is necessary. Another useless function is talk. We talk too much. We talk and talk and talk, and we never really notice it. Generally, we think we talk very little, much too little. But particularly those people who talk most think that they never talk. This is a very useful subject for watching. You will see how your day passes, how many mechanical things you say in certain conditions, how many other mechanical things in other conditions. Or you will notice that you just talk and talk because it gives you pleasure or fills your time. It is necessary to observe it and stop at least some of this unnecessary talk. Talk, imagination, lying, and expressing negative emotions are, in fact, our chief functions. Question: how does one develop one's being? Ouspensky: all that you have learned, all that you have heard about the possibility of development, all refers to being. First of all, development of being means awakening, since the chief feature of our being is that we are asleep. By trying to awake, we change our being. This is the first point. Then there are many other things. Creating unity, not expressing negative emotions, self-observation, study of negative emotions, trying to avoid useless talk. All this is work on being. For a long time we have to work from the intellectual center, but at the same time we must understand that we cannot go far with it because it has definite limits. It will bring you to a certain point, after which you cannot go further unless you can use the emotional center. But the emotional center has to be trained first. You must learn not to express negative emotions, and only if you do that for a sufficiently long time can other things be explained. Question: how can one distinguish between the emotional function and the instinctive function? Ouspensky: it is a very important question, and it must be solved by one's own observation and study. Instinctive motions are always connected with something physical. Since modern psychology does not separate instinctive emotions from other emotions, there's bound to be some difficulty in understanding the difference. But when you know that they are different, it is possible to distinguish between them. Question: can energy be stored? Ouspensky: yes, energy can be stored when you are able to store it. But at first the question is not about storing, but about not wasting. We would have enough energy for everything we want to do if we did not waste it on unnecessary things. For instance, the reason why we are so formatory is that we are too dull. We do not feel enough. We think we feel, but this is an illusion. And the reason why we feel so little is because we have no energy available for the emotional center. Leaks of energy we have already spoken about, but the worst of all is expressing negative emotions. If you can stop the expression of negative emotions, you will save energy and never feel the lack of it. We can only hope to become conscious beings if we use in the right way the energy that is now used in the wrong way. The human machine can produce enough energy, but you can waste it on being angry or irritated or something like that, and then very little energy remains. The normal organism produces quite enough energy not only for all centers, but also for storing. Production is all right, but expenditure is wrong. These leaks have to be studied, because with some kinds of leaks it is not worth going on until they are stopped. For the more you accumulate energy, the more will leak out. It would be like pouring water into a sieve. Certain negative emotions produce precisely such leaks. In some situations, some people go through a whole range of negative emotions so habitual that they do not even notice them. It may occupy only 5 minutes or 5 seconds, but it may be sufficient to spend all the energy their organism produced for 24 hours. I want particularly to draw your attention to this idea of negative emotion and the state of negative emotion. This is really the second important point. The first referred to consciousness, that we are not conscious and that we can become conscious. It is necessary to realize that there is not a single useful negative emotion, useful in any sense. Negative emotions are all a sign of weakness. Next, we must realize that we can struggle with them, that they can be conquered and destroyed because there is no real center for them. If they had a real center, like instinctive emotions, there would be no chance. We would remain forever in the power of negative emotions. So it is lucky for us that they have no real center. It is an artificial center that works, and this artificial center can be abolished. When this is done, we will feel much better for it. Even the realization that it is possible is very much, but we have many convictions, prejudices, and even principles about negative emotions. So it is very difficult to get rid of the idea that they are necessary. Question. You said we had no positive emotions? Ouspensky. In this system, we call positive emotions an emotion that cannot become negative. And all our emotions, even the best we can have in our present state, can become negative at any moment. Also, by their scope, our emotions are too small for positive emotions. Positive emotions include very much, whereas our emotions are very narrow. So at present we have no positive emotions, but negative emotions are there. Question. And if we become free of negative emotions? Ouspensky. Then we can have positive emotions. Some negative emotions can be simply destroyed, but some others we can dispose of only by transforming them into positive. Only that is very far from us now. We cannot do it at present. Now we can only prepare the ground for that, chiefly by creating right attitudes. For mental work comes first. We create right mental attitudes by understanding that negative emotions serve no useful purpose, and by realizing how much we lose by allowing ourselves the pleasure of having them. Then perhaps we will have enough energy to do something about them. Question. To do something about them is to stop them? Ouspensky. We have to begin with right understanding, right attitude. As long as we think negative emotions are unavoidable, or even useful for self-expression or something like that, we can do nothing. A certain mental struggle is necessary to realize that negative emotions have no useful function in our life, and that at the same time all life is based on them. There are many strange things in us. First, there are things that could be conscious and are not. And second, we spoil our life by negative emotions for which nature has not even provided a center, so that we must make an artificial center for negative emotions. Question. Can you always tell a negative emotion from a genuine emotion? Ouspensky. You can tell it by identification, because two things are always present in negative emotions: identification and negative imagination. Without negative imagination and identification, negative emotions cannot exist. Question. Could you give a definition of negative imagination? Ouspensky. Imagining all kinds of unpleasant things, torturing oneself, imagining all the things that might happen to you or other people. It takes different forms. Some people imagine different illnesses. Some imagine accidents. Others imagine misfortunes. Question. When you're in the middle of having a negative emotion such as bad temper, can you stop it just by thinking? Ouspensky. No, but you can prepare the ground beforehand. If you can create a right attitude, then after some time it will help you to stop the negative emotion in the beginning. When you're in the middle of it, you cannot stop it. Then it is too late. You must not let yourself get into a bad temper. You must not justify it. Question. From what you say, it seems to me you are presupposing an I higher than the other I's who can do this. Ouspensky. Not higher, but some intellectual I's are free from the emotional center and can see things impartially. They can say, I had this negative emotion all my life. Did I get a penny for it? No, I only paid and paid and paid. Question. Have we emotions that are not negative? Ouspensky. Certainly, but not positive. They are not negative yet, but they can turn negative the next moment. Question. But it seems to me there are circumstances that simply induce one to have negative emotions. Ouspensky. This is one of the worst illusions we have. We think negative emotions are produced by circumstances, whereas all negative emotions are in us, inside us. This is a very important point. We always think our negative emotions are produced by the fault of other people or by the fault of circumstances. We always think that. Our negative emotions are in ourselves and are produced by ourselves. There is absolutely not a single unavoidable reason why someone else's action or some circumstance should produce a negative emotion in me. It is only my weakness. No negative emotion can be produced by external causes if we do not want it. We have negative emotions because we permit them, justify them, explain them by external causes, and in this way we do not struggle with them.